That's when you become a channel. That's when things flow easily. That's when the money comes. It like all flows from that place. The only way to go from one destiny to the next, ascend from one reality to another, is to actually go through the darkness, which will force you to have certainty beyond logic. The bigger the test, the greater the light that wants to be revealed. We are here to really learn how to decide to have our own certainty within ourselves, to be convicted, and to believe without proof, trusting that the thing that you feel most pulled to work on or to create or to put out into the world, even though it might not logically seem like the thing that's going to make you the most amount of money, is actually the path, and it's the key because it's the thing that feels most simple. What's up, you guys? Welcome back to the podcast. So I have a solo episode for you this week, but it's a little bit different than my typical solo episodes. So this past weekend, I was at an all-day event at the Sacred Space here in Miami with David Guyam, and the event was called Manifesting Your Soul's Destiny. So it was like a full day event, 8 hours of spiritual wisdom, digging into love, relationships, prosperity, and manifestation, all utilizing the spiritual wisdom of the Kabbalah, because that's really what David teaches. So I loved the event. It was so interesting. I had an amazing time, and it was so good to just go to something where you are remembering. You know, it's so nice to have those reminders and that reconnection to the deep work, the soul work, and it just felt really good. And so, you know, I've always shared this, and this actually used to be in my Instagram bio of like where strategy meets spirituality, but that's really where I see the intersection of my work when it comes to everything that I do nowadays with, you know, business owners and being a strategist for women who have personal brands that are building in the digital education space. Obviously, my work started out in personal development, mindset, manifestation, subconscious reprogramming, a lot of like the spiritual side of things. And I also was certified in past life regression therapy. And so I love the spiritual side. And most of you who have been here for a while, you know that. And maybe that's why you originally were drawn to the podcast and you love that stuff. But then there's also that side of me that's like very strategy oriented. And I love marketing. Like I'm a marketing wizard and my brain just kind of works in that way. And messaging is one of my zones of genius. And I love getting into the nitty gritty of things, and also have this like no BS side to my personality, which is the part of me that's like, if you want amazing results, like work fucking hard, show up, and kind of calling out some of these things that can maybe be disguised through the spiritual lens, but are really just a way for people to give themselves the permission to almost not have to do anything or be lazy. And so there's those two sides of me, the yin and the yang. And we've kind of talked about this recently in some episodes with the, you know, paradox between the girl boss and the soft girl, and like feeling that tug of war that so many of us often feel of those two sides of ourselves, the masculine energy, the feminine energy. But I really think that part of like the magic of my life and what I've been able to create and business and what I help my clients with is the integration of those two pieces and really coming into a place of equilibrium with those two sides of myself for the most part, right? But like you go through seasons where one side is like a little bit more at the forefront for you, and then other seasons are different. Obviously, if you've just had a baby versus if you're just starting your business or you just quit your job, like those seasons are going to look very different. But like being an individual who can effectively balance those two sides of yourself is so valuable. And I think it's one of the major unlocks of being successful in life, in relationships, in love, and especially in business. And so I've always said, like, my work is where strategy meets spirituality. It's where effort meets energetics. It's where logic meets magic. And yeah, I think one of the best things that I've ever done is really just always allowed myself to be both. And I've never gotten too consumed in one to where I've forgotten like the pieces of my soul that yearn for the other. And I never get too wrapped up in one person's teachings or one person's type of energy or one way of doing things or one strategy, so much so that I abandon the rest of the other parts of myself, if that makes sense. Because I think that is when you get those like dramatic pendulum swings, right? When you get so enthralled or when you pedestalize a certain teacher or person or whatever to where you're like, oh my gosh, this is the way. And then you make that one thing the whole way, and that really can throw you out of alignment. And so we're in this journey of like allowing ourselves to be both, and especially as women, like accepting both sides of both of those sides of ourselves, and also understanding that they are both needed, they're both valid, they're both valuable, right? And so you'll find me at like broy Alex Hormozy events, stealing the high level sales bro strategies, right? Integrating them into my business and sharing them with my clients. And you'll also find me here at events like the one that I was at this weekend in Miami with David, soaking up spiritual reminders, reconnecting with my soul's path, and going deep in meditation and doing all this like inner spiritual work, because both are relevant and both are needed in order for us to reach our fullest potential. I really believe that. The combination of allowing yourself to be both is truly the most lethal 1-2 punch in entrepreneurship, but also probably just like in life. Do you know what I mean? So what you're going to hear today is actually a voice note that I left my mastermind clients in response to a conversation that we were having in our Telegram chat. And I proceeded to share with them this 18-minute summary of some of my notes from the event, just kind of pulling out some of the most relevant pieces to help answer this question of like, what do I do when I have no idea what to do? Because even my clients who are making millions of dollars and have millions of followers, like, yes, really, millions of dollars and millions of followers, even those types of clients experience moments of darkness, of deep transition, of complete unknown, where we ask ourselves those questions of like, who am I now? What is the next project? Should I say yes to these people, these opportunities? Is this the right business partner? How do I know which of these things is better for me? Do I do the thing that's going to print money, or the thing that I feel more excited about, but that is kind of risky and might flop? I already made it to the mountaintop. Now what? There's so many moments in life where we're faced with a new season of uncertainty. And these spiritual reminders are sometimes all we need to be able to stop overthinking and blocking ourselves and start moving in the direction of our soul's destiny. So I hope this serves you the same way that it did for my clients this morning. And you'll notice that the audio quality is going to shift a bit once we get to the voice note. And that's because it's literally the exact voice note that I sent to my clients from my iPhone this morning in my pajamas. So you'll hear me share also one of David's business principles, which is if it's not easy and simple, it's not with the light. So after I sent this message, and one of my clients was like, wow, I actually was tearing up listening to that, because even though I know these things and these principles have been part of how I've created everything that I've built up to this point, I just needed that reminder, like how much I needed that. This should be a podcast or something. And so I thought, that's not a bad idea. Like, why can't an 18-minute voice note just be a podcast? Let it be easy. Let it be simple. Let it be of the light. So that is exactly what it is this week. I hope you guys enjoy. And here we go. Hi. Okay. So I wanted to share some of my notes from the David Geim event that I went to yesterday in Miami, because I think this will be helpful for you and also for anyone else who's just in like a place in their life or their business where they feel like they're in this in between, or this growth period, or this pivot, or even just like at a crossroads of deciding to do something or not to do something, or trying to decide what the next project is, or where to invest their time, attention, energy, resources, etc. And so the event was amazing, but like a lot of what was talked about was really this idea of our soul's purpose and returning to the light and anchoring in this sense of certainty, and the fact that certainty is one of the main corrections for every soul in this lifetime. And what that means is like we are here to really learn how to decide to have our own certainty within ourselves, to be convicted, and to believe without proof, which is like the essence of faith, right? It's like believing what's possible before you can see it. Because if you could see the outcome, if you could easily see which of these two projects or which of these two programs was going to lead to the best outcome for you, to have the most money or to be the most fulfilled, or, to take your career to the next level or whatever it is, then it would be so obvious for you what to choose. But that is the kind of predicament and the journey of souls, is like, how do we choose the certainty when we don't know the outcomes, when we can't see what is behind door A or door B? And he talked a lot about the Tikkun, which, if you're familiar with David Guyam's work and kind of, the way that he studies the Kabbalah, you probably are familiar with that term, but it's really just a way to talk about like your soul's correction. And in essence, it's like everything that we experience in life is for our soul to be corrected in the ways that we chose to come back down to earth to be corrected. Every relationship that we get into is for our Tikkun. Every business decision, career decision, like all the people that we meet, the relationships that we have, like we all choose these. The parents that we have, we choose everything because it's designed to help us overcome the Tikkun, which is like the soul's correction of like, this is what you were meant to learn and conquer and discover and reveal within yourself in this lifetime. And these are the people, circumstances, places, and challenges, suffering that you were meant to have in order to do that. So he talks about the Tikkun kind of just being those negative attributes that your soul came to the world with, that you, through your experiences, have to recognize, you're being forced to recognize. And then it's your job to kind of transform those so that you can emulate more of the vibration of the Creator, so that you can be more like the light. Christians will often talk about like being more like Jesus. What would Jesus do? And it's sort of like that same essence of like, how do we be more like the Creator? A Buddhist might think about enlightenment, right? But it's all of like, how do we get closer to the light? Because that is where miracles flow from, and that's where life becomes easy. But we're humans and we live in the 3D. So we have these challenges with life, relationships, business, all these things. And the Tikkun, what is meant to, force us into these situations that make us have to like learn to go through the challenges, to move through the darkness so that we can evolve, so that we can become closer to the light, so that we can emulate more of the vibration of the Creator. Obviously, those things are challenging, and so they make us reactive. And he defines reactive behavior as any thought or action which comes from lack, fear, or doubt in order to connect to instant gratification. So the feeling of like, I want to solve this now. I have to know right now what is happening, what is right for me, what's the path, what am I supposed to do, what are they thinking about me, what are they saying about me, what should I do, what's going to be best, how can I fix this now? So all of that desire for like the instant gratification of having things solved, fixed, to know, is that kind of reactive behavior because it's coming from lack, fear, or doubt. And so he talks about how, this is one of our main corrections of mankind, is like releasing this need to know or to find out what is happening right now and choosing certainty in the uncertain. And he gave so many examples of this, a lot of things, coming back to like relationships and dating and, what do you do if you are on a trip with your partner and you've been together for a few months and he says, oh, I'm going to go for a walk on the beach. And as he starts to walk away, you see him run into this woman and they start like talking and you're kind of overhearing the conversation. You can tell that she's flirting with him. And it's like the instinct comes up, which is the reactive behavior of like, oh, I want to listen in, or I want to pretend to walk by so that I can get a better look at her, or I want to go over and assert my control and say, oh, hey, honey, I was just on my way to the gym. Like, who's this? And so there's all these like fun little, stories and examples of ways that we can see this showing up of like, we have the need to know or find out or to create that certainty. But our journey is like, how do we find the certainty within ourselves blind, when we don't know, when we don't have the full answer? That's like when we're anchored in the confidence, in our self-trust, in our connection to the divine, the Creator, whatever you believe in, of knowing that your path and your destiny cannot be messed up, believing what's available for you regardless of what's happening right now, trusting that the thing that you feel most pulled to work on or to create or to put out into the world, even though it might not logically seem like the thing that's going to make you the most amount of money, is actually the path. And it's the key because it's the thing that feels most simple. It's the thing that feels most aligned. It's the thing that feels most connected to the light. So to pass these tests when we're in these moments of like uncertainty, of I don't know, what should I do, this, that, I want to find the answer, blah, 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 blah. He says, what you say is, I don't want knowledge, like releasing the need to like actually know what the right answer is or to know what's happening or to have complete clarity. So like, I don't want the knowledge. I just want the light. And this, I found this to be kind of similar to the concept which a lot of us will be familiar with when it comes to manifestation of like, when you need nothing, you attract everything. When you're not trying to force, when you're not trying to chase, when you're not trying to manipulate, when you don't need a certain outcome, that is when all of the miracles flow, right? And so basically what he's saying is like, all you need is to be connected to the light of the creator, because from there, all miracles flow. And another interesting thing that he talked about was like the power of fun, which we all know. Like we know about the law of attraction. We know about like energy. We know that frequencies are real, but it's just a beautiful reminder once again to come back to that truth of like, when you know that you're okay and you're just living within this fun game of life that can't be messed up. And even when things are hard, you have that trust and you know that you're guided. When you're just playing the video game of life, that's when you become a channel. That's when things flow easily. That's when the idea comes. That's when the business partner appears. That's when the answers that seemed like they were nowhere to be found are suddenly there. Like that's when the money comes. It like all flows from that place. And he also talked a lot about like all of the most extreme versions of success being completely illogical and how you have to be delusional in your certainty. Going back to like one of the first things that I shared that he had said was like one of the main corrections of our souls in this lifetime is certainty, like having to be delusional in our own certainty before the proof is there. So not needing to go find the answer or ask everybody or manipulate or force or try to, figure out in the 3D, like what is the answer, but it's like the certainty beyond logic, the certainty beyond proof, the certainty beyond what is available within the physical 3D in front of our eyes, like creating that level of certainty. We have to be delusional in that certainty. And so what was interesting is I actually didn't know this about him. I learned it before going to the event, but he's the co-founder of Mary Ruth's, which is a kind of like vitamin supplement company. And it's apparently the number one vitamin company in the USA. I have some of their supplements, but I didn't know that he was the co-founder. So his ex-wife is Mary Ruth, and that was one of the businesses that they started together. But he told us a story about like how they met, and he was this young guy. He was teaching Kabbalah. He was at the Kabbalah Center all day doing this like spiritual work, helping people, just basically being a teacher, but like had literally no money. And Mary Ruth was the one that was making money. She was in real estate, but she had like all of this debt that she took on when her family's company went under, and they decided not to go for bankruptcy, but to actually take on the debt of all the properties from that business. And so when they got together, they were like $700,000 in debt. He was making no money. She decides to quit her job in real estate and also make no money because she feels inspired about this idea of like helping people with their nutrition. So she kind of starts one-on-one nutrition consulting, and she's making some money from that, but it's really challenging because it's not scalable. And so this whole big long story about how randomly one day she gets the idea for a liquid vitamin because she was helping people with certain chronic illnesses where they needed to be on a liquid diet for a certain amount of time, kind of like fasting, but they couldn't take their supplements while they were on the liquid diet because he kept upsetting their stomachs, the capsules. And so she was like, I need a liquid vitamin, like let's create one. And so that's kind of like how Mary Ruth started, which I think is now like a billion-dollar company or something. It's really, really wild. But their story is very much from like, I think he called it like elected poverty. He's like, I was in elected poverty, like where I was choosing something that I knew was bringing me closer to the light, that felt right in my soul. I just wanted to help people. I wanted to be this spiritual teacher. I had no idea like how this was going to work. We were living in this tiny apartment in New York. I was sleeping on the floor, basically. And he was like, there was parts of me, of course, that logically was like, this feels wrong because I'm spending so much time. I'm helping all these people. I'm investing all this energy to do the right thing, but it's not, I don't see the compensation. It's not like flowing to me. Like I'm not making any money. I can't live this beautiful life. Like I'm helping these people all day long. And then I come home and like my life is kind of like dark and depressing and there's no abundance. And the light flip sort of switched one day when he was like, I have to create the certainty beyond logic. Like I have to decide. And so he talks about walking through New York City and being like, I'm a billionaire. I own all these buildings, and like, going over and over and over it in his mind until he could actually vibrationally feel that there was this certain level of certainty that something along those lines was available to him. And he had no idea how it was going to happen or where it would come from, but he actually created the vibrational certainty. And like, we all know this, right? From the power of like visualization and mindset stuff, but it's always really cool to hear it from other people's perspectives and see how those stories play out in their own lives and the success that ultimately comes and flows through them. And so in being in that state of like elected poverty, of like choosing a path that wasn't going to be the most lucrative, that wasn't going to bring him the most amount of money, but creating the certainty within himself that there were massive, opportunities and abundance and fulfillment available to him regardless, that kind of created the unlock. And so a lot of the chaos that sometimes we experience in our business comes from when we are making things or doing things where the intention is from the tikkun. It's from the wound or the challenge or the need for validation, or because we wanted to prove someone wrong, or because we have a chip on our shoulder, or because we want revenge, or because we want to prove that we're better or that we can do it, or look at me now, or whatever. And so he was talking about, if you are experiencing chaos in your business in any sort of realm, like go back in time and find that time where you created something for the business where the intention was from the tikkun. And there is where you will find part of your correction, because the only way to go from one destiny to the next, aka to move to like ascend from one reality to another, is to actually go through the darkness, which will force you to have certainty beyond logic. So if you are in a place of indecision, of chaos, of not knowing, of having trouble deciding, discerning, choosing, and you're in that like period of darkness, of the complete unknown, moving through the darkness is the thing that is going to force you to have certainty beyond logic. Because when you're not in darkness, you can see the options, you know what's going to happen, you know the possible outcomes. And so you don't have to be certain beyond logic. The only time you have to actually cultivate faith, true faith, right? Blind faith, choosing to believe before you can see, having certainty beyond logic, is when you are in that like darkness unknown period where you do not fucking know. And that is kind of the magic. And he basically says, like, if it doesn't start with that, then nothing beyond that is blessed. And so if you're in that period, know that you are at the heart of your correction. And it is like the most opportune time for you to break through and have crazy like elevations, because the bigger the test, the greater the light that wants to be revealed. And so the last thing that I would just add to this, I included here in my notes for anyone who is like trying to make a certain decision in their business or choose a path or understand, one way versus another, is like, he mentioned the number one business rule that he kind of operates from is like, if it's not easy, if it's not simple, then it's not with the light. And so maybe that helps create some clarity within you, or helps you develop the courage to have the certainty beyond logic of knowing what is going to be right for you moving forward. Because he says the moment that we react to our circumstances and we create from the tikkun, that's basically when we're saying that the light is not as important as the money. And so with small things, it can be easy to be like, oh yeah, like, if I'm trying to make this decision or that, like, I'll just follow my heart, I'll follow my gut, I'll follow the light, I'll go with what feels the lightest. But when the circumstances get bigger or more intense, like that's when it becomes more challenging to actually put this into practice. But you can look at it that way and kind of weigh out, how does this feel? Does it feel like I'm choosing money over what brings me closer to the vibration of the creator, of light, of God, of alignment, of what feels true to my soul? And if that's the answer, then okay, that's going to bring me farther away. Even if logically on paper, it's like, that should make me rich or that should make me money. If it feels like it's bringing you farther away from the light, then in the end, it's not the thing that's ultimately going to have blessings and miracles rushing towards you. And so in his own story, right, his version of like elected poverty was like ultimately the thing that allowed him to create and amass insane levels of wealth. And when I was sitting there in the audience listening to him talk about these things, I was like, it's so funny because I've had this conversation on my podcast with other guests in the past of like, it's so interesting how when I decided to decline my corporate job offers and move to Spain because I wanted to follow my heart and move closer to something that felt like the light, which was my relationship at the time, which was very new. I was like, I also went into quote unquote elected poverty. I knew that I was going to be making no money, that I was making a move that made no sense for my career. There was no reason for me to think logically that that was going to be a helpful, supportive, lucrative decision for my life. But by moving into that, because I felt like it was something that was bringing me closer to the light, even if logically it was moving me farther away from progress, recognition, validation, money, any of those other things. Ultimately, by doing that, that was the thing that birthed my own spiritual awakening, my own personal development journey, unlocking my own gifts that allowed me to become a teacher, a coach, a creator that built a platform, a podcast, and then millions of dollars came rushing towards me. Like, it was very interesting to see the parallels between what he was talking about in his journey and how I've also experienced that in my own life. And so all of this to just say, and hopefully be helpful and supportive for some of you, if you're in a moment of indecision or darkness or pivot or trying to figure out like what you are meant to do next, allowing these concepts and these ideas to be a guiding light and hopefully create some level of that certainty that we have to manufacture within ourselves because we don't have the proof, because we don't have the evidence, because it doesn't make sense. But deciding to be delusional in our conviction and our certainty of knowing what is right for our soul and moving closer to the light.